although I see this time as the worst time in my life, throw in a divorce and within that 7 years, like it's without a doubt the hardest time in my life, but equally it's the best time because it taught me a lot about myself and my resilience. And it taught me, I always said to myself, if I ever come good, if I ever fix this fucking thing, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Oh, yeah.
If I ever fix this thing, I'll never complain about anything else for the rest of my days.
That was Scott Gooding, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey. From wherever we are, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, recognising their continuing connection to this land, its waterways, the stars in the skies since time immemorial. We pay our respects to the elders, knowledge holders, and to all the generations of First Nations peoples who have nurtured their unceded sovereign lands for over 80,000 years and continue to do so today.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott.
G'day, welcome back to The Regenerative Journey. If you had listened to last week's intro, you'll be not surprised to hear that this intro is just as echoey. It's because I'm doing it in the same room as last week here at the farm Byron Bay. Thank you, Blair Beattie and the Farmers Footprint team for letting me sit in your chair, Blair, which is actually, it's one of those ergonomic. Very smart, Blair. Very smart indeed. Never sat in such a comfy, supportive chair in all my life. Sitting here and appreciative that I've got somewhere to do a recording. Before I bang on about Scott Gooding, the chef/cook, I'm not sure if that does make me wonder, because when a chef is a chef, they're sort of trained and they've certainly done the hard yards in terms of formal training, whatever that even looks like. I don't even know what that looks like now. I know that many a chef, as well as formal training, apprenticeships take place in the kitchen, the bowels of hotels and pubs and kitchens to cut their teeth. But I think and Scott may well be a good example of someone who could be called a chef, hasn't had the formal training, but has done as many hard yards in terms of their culinary skills and experience. Just a thought, one. Because I'm never really sure if calling a chef a cook is not acceptable, or if whether chefs get upset when a cook or someone without the formal training is called a chef. I don't know. It's all a bit political and PC for me, maybe. But anyway, Scott's the real deal. Before I bang on about him, I do want to talk about, just quickly, because it's worth, not quickly because it's insignificant, but quickly because I'm just conscious of time. Scott's mother-in-law, Rachel Ward, who I interviewed, and it's going back a couple of years now. In my first year, in 2020 it would have been, August, September, somewhere around there, had the lovely experience of chatting with Rachel on the veranda of their wonderful house in the sort of what would you call it, mid-north coast? No, it's sort of, Nambucca, near there. Lovely little farm. And that farm has become the setting of a new film, a documentary that she's released. It's actually going to be released on the 3rd of August, I think officially, but she's doing some Q&As and panel sessions throughout the world, the country. Well, she has been over the world with it. I've shown it at a few film festivals across the world. Rachel's farm. Oh my God! We're having staffies out the back here at the farm Byron Bay, and someone sounds like they're getting throttled. So excuse me for a bit of screeching in the background. Rachel's farm. So her farm is the site, the scene, the story of Rachel's farm, and I saw it the other day. It was so beautiful. I had to text Rachel immediately because I thought it was a lovely thing. Angelica thought it was just fantastic, and all power to you, Rachel, for creating, producing, directing, pulling together such a wonderful film doco about your regenerative journey. Essentially, that's what it has been from, 30 or so years of conventional farming and then involving your neighbours, the greens and other friends, and your journey through. It's just so well put together. So please, anyone who feels so inclined to watch it, Google it, find it, check out a screening near you. 3rd of August, I think it's officially released. I hope I've got that date right. But go and see it. It's fantastic. Now, as I was speaking, Dave Westbrook, he just sent me a text, which reminds me, Dave Westbrook I interviewed, which I can't remember which season, 3 or 4, so that was going back early last year. Or was it the year before, Dave? I can't remember. Farm Owners Academy. Now, a couple of things there. Dave, lovely bloke, and such a big future in front of him. Fantastic interview we had there at Hanamino. He was travelling around Australia with his lovely family, Becky's wife and the kids, in a caravan that Farm Owners Academy had sort of sorted out for him and allowed him to do some coaching and travel and, achieve a few of his personal goals. And my point being that I spent some time with Dave recently and a few hundred other farmers at a Farm Owners Academy conference, which was fantastic. And 2 days, really very eye-opening, very interesting group, fantastic stuff. They're really doing some good stuff. I'm not being paid by them, by the way. I'm just keen to share what happens in my world every now and again. And what happened over those 2 days was fantastic. I really enjoyed the process that Farm Owners Academy was going through in terms of business growth and development and getting the foundation right and that sort of stuff. Really interesting stuff. Dave's a coach for them, and I am better reply to his text message shortly. It sounds very interesting. He's got an idea. Anyone who knows Dave, please don't ring him up if you listen to this and say, what was the idea? Because it's probably between her and I at the moment. So, but yeah, there's a bit of a plug for farm owners. They're really lovely group, and really pleased to have spent 2 days there with them, just understanding what their offering is, their service, and their genuine desire to help farmers and create freedom farmers is basically their tagline. How do you create a situation, a business where you can be a farmer who doesn't have to be on the farm? I think that's a bloody good idea. Now, to Scott Gooding, lovely bloke. I can't remember if I've already mentioned this. You'll hear it in the first few minutes, chatting, and then something happened that was quite strange, and then we started on some tangent about how strange that was and other experiences we'd had, but other strange experiences we'd had. We got right off track. We didn't sort of go back to him for a little bit. But lovely bloke. We, from his sort of early beginnings in the UK and then moving out to Australia, and his, rise to, notoriety in various circles, his meeting and partnering with Matilda Brown, Rachel's daughter, and the fantastic things they've been doing in their space, in the food space and the health space. He's a really fit rooster, is Scott. And lovely because we'd been sort of trying to track down time to meet and have the interview for some time. So it was lovely to be up there in his happy place, sitting on the veranda overlooking Pacific Ocean, over the top of Whale Beach there, watching the eagles sort of, catch the thermals over the peninsula there to head west, I should say, into the Pittwater. Just fantastic. So the sights and sounds of that beautiful part of the world. Lovely bloke, and I really hope you enjoyed this chat. It was really relaxed. That's what I have to say, which is the way we like to roll. This interview with Scott Gooding on the regenerative journey. Scott Gooding, this is paradise.
This is paradise.
This is incredible.
Beautiful birds.
Yeah.
You sometimes get huge sea eagles that sort of want to get back onto the other side, so they use the thermals to get themselves over the ridge. And as they go over, you see that they've got like a big fish in their talons. And
incredible.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, isn't it lovely? There's actually still a whole lot of bird life here. Mm. Scott, we're going. We're on. We're away. No, have a sip. Have a sip. Oh, hang on. No, we're not. What's going on there? I thought that was on. Here we are. You were using your camera, your phone, thankfully, because mine ran out of storage. But we're off.
I've got that filter that makes us look
Handsome.
More handsome.
Well, clearly it's only working on half the screen. You're handsome and I'm not.
About that. My head looks very small compared to yours.
Yeah, I know. I've got a beard and a lot of
very square. You're very Roman.
Oblong as which is rectangle for most. When I was at school, we learnt in school when I was at primary school oblong. Didn't know what the word rectangle was.
Right.
Ever heard of oblong?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then someone said, "Oh, that's rectangle. What's rectangle?" But anyway, that's the shape of my head. Welcome to the regenerative journey. That was not the record. That's not the record for the most amount of chit chat before the intro. Scott, welcome to the regenerative journey, and welcome to the veranda of your residence up here at Whale Beach in the northern beaches of Sydney.
Thank you. It's nice to have you back.
Yeah, well, it was only early December.
Yeah, 10th of December or something.
Why? What was I here for?
What, you can't hear without crying?
No.
Charlie was hammered.
No. I drove.
You were here as part of a small, intimate gathering for, like a private luncheon, I guess, with the beautiful Zach Bush.
The Bush.
I saw someone else from there a couple of days ago, yesterday, actually.
It was lovely.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was nice to have, I think the number of people made it what it was, It was just small, intimate, and, everyone was like-minded, and I think there's something to be said for wallowing in the energy that Zach Bush emits, there's something, he's a pretty special guy.
He is an emitter, isn't he? He's prone to talk about the emission of carbon and kind of that whole cycle. Thankfully, he's not one of those people who run around talking about the one-way traffic going in the atmosphere and so on. He's got lots of other parts of that story, but I suspect he was probably grateful to have a little intimate thing as well, because he'd been doing pretty much, a lot of public, reasonably large public appearances, hadn't he? And he was only here for 10 days, I think.
Yeah, he's in that stratosphere that, I guess he has to be mindful of his energy because everyone wants to speak to him, everyone wants to meet him. He's going to these events that, there's probably queues before and after that want to shake his hand and have a little exchange. So he's definitely in that stratosphere that he needs to sort of guard himself somewhat. But so he probably did appreciate that there was only, I don't know, what 15?
Yeah, it would be 15,
yeah.
A handful of people. Does that door usually open by itself?
Only when there's spirits.
Well, one's going for a bath. For those who can't see, because you can't, and I'm a bit scared to move the camera, there's a lovely enamel bathtub on the veranda down here, and
that's where I was moments before you came.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Scott did greet me without his shirt on, which was a bit intimidating for an unfit bloke like me. But if we see the tap turn on, water going into there, that's when we should worry.
I'm not a particularly huge believer in the supernatural. Yeah, I'm not a believer. I'm not a non-believer either. Yeah. But I probably err more on the side of a non-believer. Mm-hmm. But there are things that happen in this house that I can't explain. It's not frightening. It doesn't, and I'm not saying that in a macho kind of way.
Yeah.
If it is a spirit, it's not a demonic, terrifying spirit. So it doesn't scare you. But there are noises. If you care to stay one night, I'm sure you would experience the same. But yeah, Till and I often...
That might be a good reason not to stay.
It's just my long-winded way of
I'm glad you've
uninviting you.
Look, you wouldn't want to stay. You can stay, but you wouldn't want to because there's someone else in there.
Quite often, Till and I are we've gone to sleep for however long, I'm not sure, an hour, 2 hours, and then we find ourselves both sitting up, bolt upright, going, what was that? Footsteps, things moving, a toy truck rolling down the hallway, really? Unexplained things.
Yeah, well, more than just like the wind or I mean, look, truth be known, I'm a big fan of the supernatural.
Oh, really?
Well, fan in terms of I'm fascinated by it. It's to me, as a trained in science and different sciences, I've got that, but I've also, as a reference point, but also I just love the fact that there is shit going on that we can't explain, or we can't put a number to, or we can't see. There's so much going on around us that we can't see. And when I finally get you to one of our biodynamic workshops, we do talk about nature spirits and that sort of unseen, the unexplained, the unmeasurable part of nature, which I think is probably 99% of nature. There's what we can see, and that's a palm, and it's lovely, and it's green, and it's living, and I think there's just so much more going on. So back to your house, there are. I have absolutely no doubt there's that 99% of these houses anywhere in the world has residual energies in it. People who used to live there that are deceased generally. Sometimes residuals can be left in houses by people who are still alive, but while they were living in there, or they visited even, it only takes a visit, leave subtle energies that are
imprinted.
Stick around.
Yeah.
Like hotels, they're classics for that. I
Yeah.
mean, the turnover of people, like 365 different people could sleep in their bed in a year.
Yeah.
And God knows what happens
Yeah, we're not
in
that
those
busy
beds.
here.
That makes me feel better that given the invitation was given and then taken away.
But apparently there is some spirit that resides in the bedroom downstairs. So if my son, whose bedroom it is downstairs, is listening to this, I'm sorry, mate, I should have told you, but apparently that's his or her. I think it's a him. I think it's an old fella.
How do you know that? Did you have someone go, oh, hang on, I can sense it, or you've been told by the previous...
Till likes to connect with... what are those people that... not mediums,
well,
but
they're kind of mediums, aren't they?
They have a different name. Anyway, she likes
they're in that world, the world of spooky wawa. Yeah.
So she speaks to one of those... probably annually, just to get a check in. Am I on the right path? And the last time she did, she asked about, is there a spirit here? And the lady said, yeah, there's an old gentleman who is in the bedroom downstairs. He actually just wants, he doesn't want anything from you. He isn't a malevolent force. He's a kind man. Until it's like, we got the sense that he wasn't trying to scare the shit out of us. He was, just tinkering around while we were sleeping.
Well, sometimes they can.
I wish he'd bloody tidy up while we're sleeping. That'd be nice.
Be useful. Sometimes it can be mischievous, and I've done a couple of courses with a fellow called Dr. Patrick McManaway, and he's Scottish, lives in Vermont half the year, in Scotland the other half, does a subtle energy course. He's here at the moment, actually, in Queensland. Fascinating stuff. And he subtle energies and geomancy, which is kind of... Well, geomancy is kind of the clearing... My definition, anyway, is a clearing of natural and sometimes man-made energies in the landscape. So here, for instance, Whale Beach... I've no doubt, and I'm not that in tune to kind of go, oh, there's one there and one there, but there would be ley lines, some natural, which would be just energies in the natural landscape which flow from here to there and so on. There would also be indigenous, because this is quite a prominent spot, and maybe these headlands would be indigenous laid down ley lines as well. Now, if someone like Patrick can because they're not dissimilar. A subtle energy ley line over here is not dissimilar in terms of it's how you deal with it as a spirit in a bedroom in downstairs, and they can be removed. And it's a matter of acknowledging them, asking there. In the case of old mate downstairs, there, I know. Just bear with me. This is pushing it, isn't it? Asking there. It's fascinating.
I wasn't laughing at that. I was laughing at you just calling him old mate. I wasn't laughing at what you were saying.
No. and asking their loved ones to come back, because basically he's been left behind.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what this lady said to Till. If you want him to, move on, just acknowledge him and say, kind of, so many words, it's okay for you to move on.
Well, one thing there is that if you can, if one can, you either get someone to do it for you, or you kind of just put the intention in, is ask for his family or his relatives or his loved ones to come back and take him to where he needs to go, because generally that happens when someone dies suddenly and they don't even know they're dead.
Right.
There's 3 or 4 ways, and another one is that they die without having finished a purpose and they don't want to go and they're hanging on.
Right.
And there's a 3rd or 4th one I can't remember, but there's reasons why these spirits tend to stick around.
Mate, should we take all this equipment downstairs? Let's perform an exorcism.
Yeah, look, I'm not. We've done
not
some.
Qualified?
No, not qualified. I haven't got my ticket, but I've done. But I sort of I love it in terms of I appreciate it, and it makes so much sense. I mean, here we are. Weren't intending to talk about that, but it came up.
I've got my father-in-law, who you would know.
Yes,
He's a very. He's probably the most practical man I've ever come across. Like he's very matter of fact.
Yeah.
Practical. He's got he's a sort of. It's not his profession, but he's statistics. He's mathematical. Like that's his
objectivity. Yeah.
That's his mode.
Yeah.
And he's not one for the supernatural, but he's got this story of when he was living in London, of this thing, this entity, jumping on his back, and he wrestled with this thing for like half an hour, slamming it up against a wall, like he was dripping in sweat. And, next time you see him, ask him about his story, because the way he tells it is it puts shivers down your spine, you know what I mean?
And why would you make that shit up too? Like as long as you go,
exactly. Yeah. But coming from the mouth of the man that he is, you're like, well, that happened.
There's something in that.
Yeah. Like he's not just telling it for shits and giggles. Like that actually happened, and it's unexplained.
Does he know there's something downstairs? He might be too scared to go in there. You'll get jumped on again.
Well, he's got a farm as well. He was saying the other week that I forget. It probably came about when we were talking about this guy downstairs. That for about 20 years, so they've had the farm for 40. So half that time, there was a spirit, a man, a farmer that used to. They now think that used to live on the property. It used to be an old dairy, and then it was a pig farm. So somewhere in that timeline, somebody died. And that spirit, that guy still is lingering around and made himself known to not only the family, but other people that were staying there. Kids that were from other families that were staying would be like woken up in the middle of the night with this man standing at the foot of their bed. Like horrific stories, like if you're a kid.
Not quite as passive as your friend downstairs.
No.
Well, I mean, again, that can be dealt with. So you said 20 years ago. So is it being dealt with?
Not.
Everyone got used to
deliberately. Nothing. There was no sort of intervention, but he reckons for the last 20 years there's been nothing. But I tell you what, there's some outhouses at the farm that even me as a grown man who doesn't really assign to the supernatural, I don't really want to sleep on my own.
No, I stayed there one night last year before.
Yeah, right.
In the barn. It'd only just been done up. So
straight across from the main house.
Yeah, sort of diagonal.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's got a little bathroom out on the back corner there. No,
you're all right there.
That was. I slept well.
It's the one directly opposite the main house. They call it the bunkhouse.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know that one.
Which I'm going up there tomorrow, and that's where I'll be sleeping for the next 3 or 4 nights. And there's no question in my mind that something operates in that space.
Well, you can... we'll get to interviewing you in a minute. Where you can... You didn't
expect this, did you?
No. This is what I love about this sort of stuff, not just this specifically Spooky Wawa, but just the dancing and the conversation.
But everyone's tuned in for some farming...
Oh no, they're going, when are you going to talk about...
Get to it.
No, I mean, you can do things like bring in white light and have a sage, like a smudge stick and do that sort of stuff. And Brian might look at you and go, "Hey, you bloody weirdo," and then you just remind him about the entity on his back.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Well, thanks, Scott. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap for supernatural.com.
Oh no, I might come back. Who knows where it's going to appear in the next little while. Scott, so and just for the listeners' benefit, we are in a suburban sort of situation, so there is children in a pool next door, and birds chirping and the waves rolling in. So if there's some,
I can't hear us at all.
No, no, they've probably tuned out by now. That sound quality. So if you hear a bit of that. The only other thing that could probably happen is a chopper over the top or something like that. So, Scott, let's. This is. I mean, I guess we're here because it's convenient. You're at home, and that worked out a treat here on the Easter weekend, and also. I like to pounce on my guests in their happy place. I mean, is this apart from old mate downstairs? Is this a happy place for you? I mean,
well, this house in general, but probably where we are. Give or take a metre or two is probably I spend an obscene amount of time just looking at the ocean, which I think I've been lucky enough in the last, probably even when I was in the UK, the last stint I had there before I emigrated, I was close to a beach, within walking distance. So I've always found it a place to gaze and sort of lose yourself a little bit, but we spoke about this offline a second ago, but
let's share anything that we said offline for sure that's appropriate.
There's not much.
We had a good chat.
But I've got into surfing in the last sort of several years, so it's now become. There's now another reason to gaze at the ocean. So it's a spot that sort of clears your mind. There's something to be said for seeing the horizon and that big expanse. It clears the mind, and when the waves are rolling in and the 10-foot plus, it kind of it reduces your ego a little bit. Yeah. You're like, okay, well, there's this thing just down there that's forever moving. It doesn't stop all through the night. The waves are crashing. It kind of just puts you back in your place a little bit because there's a force down there that's,
far greater.
I'm not the type of surfer that paddles out in any condition, beyond sort of 4 or 5 foot. I'm like, I'm out, because it is relentless. It is a force to be reckoned with, and you shouldn't sort of take it lightly. I mean, it doesn't look like it now today. It's quite serene and beautiful and calm and tranquil, but I guess just over there I spend a lot of hours it makes it sound like I've got, but over the course of a day it's probably an hour or two just sort of resting my elbows on there looking out. Don't tell my wife that. She thinks I'm busy working, but
Matilda, I'm really busy today. Yeah. She'll set up a little camera here and go, "No, I know what you're doing."
No, she knows exactly what I'm doing at every given moment, I reckon.
Well, I don't blame you for spending quality time here looking at that amazing view. It's mesmerising, isn't it? There's a little yacht poking along there. And as I was saying before, as kids we would rent, or Mum and Dad would, a house at the northern end up there, which is no longer there, and there's certainly a whole lot of houses in front of it where there used to be a big lawn. Well, there was vegetation, and it was a long, thin block. I can't even tell which house it is now, really, but it was a lovely, lovely spot and quiet. And there was a sort of a group of country people who always come up every summer. We do 3 weeks here. Dad would go back for every week to check, because there were fires or just to check on the farm. It's and as I was saying, my grandparents lived at Collaroy, which is not far to the south, and I just love it up here. It's just such a. It's only when you get up here and go, why don't I come up here more often?
Yeah, Well, it's one of those places that it'll never overdevelop. You can see, it's not short of houses, but equally there's space and there's lots of vegetation. There's trees.
Yeah.
They'll never put high rises or blocks of units in. So it's this beautiful little cove, really.
Yeah.
And, like, I've got friends who live a stone's throw away, but they're on the other side, so they look down on pit water.
Yeah.
Which, it's bloody first world problems, but...
Lovely sunsets.
Beautiful sunsets. But there's...
Not quite the same.
But the water at pit water doesn't really change, it's obviously tidal and all that, but here, back to my point and my excuse for looking at the ocean as much as I do is that it's always changing. Obviously there's tides, but there's winds, there's whales, there's boats, there's jet skis. There's always something to look at.
Well, it's like not entertainment. That's not the right word, but it's just it holds one's attention, doesn't it? Now we better pay our attention to your life, Scott. So why don't we start? Can we start in wherever that began? The place, the circumstance, just to set the scene for us, because I know it wasn't in Australia that you appeared.
Yeah, I appeared. I popped my head out in Camden Town, in London, in 1975. So my mum and dad ran pubs. They were the youngest publicans of that time in London. I think my mum was like 19, my dad was 22 or thereabouts. So pretty young to have your own pub.
And what was it called?
The first pub they had was the Parr's Head on Plender Street.
The Parr's Head?
The Parr's Head. Thomas Parr
was
I won't even pretend to know what Thomas Parr did. I did look it up once, but I can't remember. But yeah, he had a pub. He was significant enough to have a pub named after him. And it was this cute little old pub on Plender Street, just off Camden High Street. So they were there for a number of years. And then they were given a pub on number 1 Camden High Street called the Southampton Arms. And so I think I was conceived in the Parr's Head. I was born in the Southampton Arms. And we lived there...
Hang on, in a hospital or in the actual pub?
Yeah, in Middlesex University Hospital, North London.
So it wasn't like,
No.
in the sports bar of the or the back bar of
TAB,
yeah. Lovely.
And so I guess it's worth noting, because I'm sure we'll get there, that my mum and dad, not only being young publicans, were trying to pave the way to somewhat change, whether they knew it at the time, but somewhat change the landscape of pubs. I went back to the UK at Christmas, and every pub is now a food pub. Right,
a focus on food.
Yeah, so right. I would say it's probably hard. You'd be hard pushed to find like a quintessential boozer now, as we used to call them. Like a real drinkers pub. But that was definitely the case back in the day. It was, you'd flip that. You'd be hard pushed to find good grub in a pub. But my mum started putting, she put like a sort of what we would call a pie warmer on the counter and would serve up, say, guinea pie and cottage pie and shepherd's pie.
Did she make them?
Yeah, all homemade.
Yeah, beautiful.
And so then over time they got a bit of a reputation for that, and people would come as much for the drink as they would for the feed. And then that sort of developed, went beyond the pie warmer sitting on the counter to, a full menu, and you'd sit down and dine just like, you do now. But back then it was kind of not the norm. So I guess how that influenced me is that I've always been around food. I'm sure we'll jump ahead on why that why is that relevant now, but because I'm a chef and I work in the food industry, but I can now see the lineage and the link between where I am now and what parts of food are attractive to me, and how that relates to my upbringing. You can't pull them apart. Like, it's so... The first time I really understood it was I've written a number of cookbooks, but there was one cookbook in particular that was an e-cookbook, actually, and it was the first time I was writing on my own, because the first few I was a co-author, there was no publisher, so I was like, okay, well, what are the recipes that I really want to see in a cookbook? And they were all recipes that, were reminiscent of when I was growing up. And so and now, fast forward however many years, I'm making steak and kidney pies that is what my mum became sort of renowned for in her local community. Like, people would drive miles on a Saturday morning to get before we unlocked the door of the pub, the car park would be, pretty much full, waiting for, people waiting to get the first hot pies coming out the kitchen.
Wow.
So it's funny now that I'm cooking exactly the same thing.
Full circle in a way. Why did they go against the grain or decide that they would, pioneer somewhat that kind of a culture, food culture there? What was their motivation?
My dad's not with us anymore, unfortunately. Maybe it's him that's downstairs. Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, don't get rid of him then.
He's very welcome. Look, if I would ask my mum, what was your motivation, or, did you realise you were pioneering a movement, she'd be sort of, she'd laugh that off, or wouldn't say that, she was contributing to anything significant at all, because she's so modest. But I don't know. I think, maybe there was some sort of economic advantage if people are coming in, they can come in for beer and beer alone, but maybe if you offer something else, i.e. food, maybe people come in for food as well. There's probably more money to be made in food over pints. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe it's but they weren't the type of people to think, let's carve out this new.
No, it might have been not their intention.
Yeah,
it was just
not their intention.
Kind of what you saw in it.
But now, as I said, I was there at Christmas, and like the standard of food in pubs now is like phenomenal. We ate at a pub most lunchtimes when we were there, because there's something in my DNA. Clearly, my upbringing dictates this, that I love the smell of a pub or a beer-soaked bar towel or floor, sticky floor,
the carpet.
Like it's like smelling an old
friend.
Smelling an old friend. Like smelling an old man. No, but it's like smelling an old toy, probably. It's.
Well, I guess that's nice that brings up good memories.
Oh yeah, I'm a bit of a fussy fart and a bit of a snob, so I don't want to go to any pub. I want to go to probably the oldest pub or the cutest looking pub, so I took
not the slug and lettuce.
Not the slug and lettuce. No, they're the pubs I'll avoid. But I'll go to I took the family to a pub in Norwich, which is like it's 1,000 years old.
No way.
So I'm reading everything on the walls and looking at the walls, and it's I want to soak all that up.
Are there any sort of that type of food, that cuisine in pubs? Is there any that you sort of your go-tos in Sydney? Just to give them any a plug. Is there anywhere or not? I mean, you don't have to make it up.
No,
nothing quite.
Till and I hardly ever go out. Certainly, we found it mildly amusing that we were dining every lunchtime in a pub, because it's just not something we would do back home. Like, we got into a bit of a habit of, you've got to bear in mind it was the middle of winter, and so you're out for a couple of hours, and then you want to get in somewhere snug, and we got into this habit of finding the cutest, oldest pub and having a pint in the middle of the day.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, getting some grub in for the family and the kids and stuff. It was a nice little ritual we inhabited for 3 weeks. It was good.
So, did Mum have you in the kitchen rolling pastry to make pies? Like, what was your apart from kind of the smells and seeing them in the pie warmer? where did your interest in food? I mean, I guess you're in that environment, but was there a particular moment or a thing that you specialised in, or that kind of propelled you into that world?
Well, I started working in the pub at a pretty young age. Bottling up, putting bottles back on the shelves before school and all that sort of stuff. But I guess I did a lot of growing up in a pub called The Swan just outside of Bedford in a cute little village called Bromham. And so I was there from, probably we were there for 10 years. I left when I was, 6 to 16 probably. And I would get home from school, and this is going to sound terrible, but my mum and dad were asleep, right? So I'd get home from school at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and my dad would be in bed and my mum would be asleep on the lounge, because in those days pubs weren't allowed to open 24 hours, unbroken opening hours. You had to close. So at 3 o'clock you closed, you're back open at 6, I think. So there was a lull in the day, so they would sort of recharge their batteries. So when I got home, I'd be hungry from school.
They're asleep.
God forbid I'd wake my dad. Certainly wouldn't want to make my mum either, so I'd just make myself something to eat. And, I'm not talking about anything cordon bleu, but, there was a fridge, double door stand-up fridge full of fresh produce. And I know now that's a privilege and that's not replicated in everyone's home. So I kind of understand the fortuitous position that we were in, that we had a busy kitchen and there was a need for fresh produce. So, I'd quite often make something that I thought was edible. And I guess over the years, you kind of, like any craft, not that I thought about it like this at the time, but with anything, like the more you do of something, the more reps you do, the better you get at that thing. And then, so that was after school. So I was sort of making my own food at a pretty young age. And then, the doors would open again at 6 and punters would roll in. It was a big pub, dining room and lounge and a public bar. So there was orders flying into the kitchen. We had either my mum or there was another chef there. And so I had two choices if I wanted to eat that night. I could sneak my order into the pad. This was before iPads and all that malarkey, but I would sneak my order in and just put, instead of like table 4, it'd be like Scott upstairs, or I would jump in and make it myself.
Amongst the sort of
either way, I was a pain in the ass, because the chef there was this Scottish. He was not the nicest, most pleasant man you've ever met. But so either way, I was going to get in his way. I was going to get in his road. So he'd either see my order, and there was no way he was going to make that in the order that he saw in the pad. He'd be like, little prick, he can wait. So invariably, I just jumped in and made it myself. Yeah. And scooted around everyone in the kitchen. Yeah. And then, isn't far from then that you're living out of home and you're having to cook for yourself, and but it's something that I love cooking. Just like sitting up here at the balcony and peering out, being in the kitchen is my if you ever come to a party here, you'll find me in the kitchen, not anywhere else. It's kind of my sanctuary.
When we were just getting back to when Zach Bush was here, you were absent because you had, I know an oven didn't work too, so you were trying to cook fish and you had some big chunky bits of beef there as well and all sorts of other yummy things, so we didn't see much of you until towards the end. So I totally get it. That's your happy place. So it's interesting that I guess it would have been quite experimental for you. You wouldn't have had, I'm not sure if you were using recipe books or just intuition or just like, oh shit, that I'll put that with that and see what happens. But that would be an interesting playground for creativity without, on your own between 3 and 6, just like cooking up something. That's probably quite a unique scenario for someone to, I guess, experiment without probably too much criticism or guidance,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's you've got the meat, you're in a commercial kitchen, so you've got all the pots and the pans and all the gadgets that you need. You've got a fridge or a freezer full of produce. It's sort of, the canvas is there, you know what I mean? It was as I said, knowing where I am now and what excites me, I can now see where it all started. It's clear as day for me that lineage and that connection with my youth. I was, the foods that were in my packed lunchbox. So my packed lunchbox, and this is not actually what I wanted at the time, because as a kid you want to fall in with everyone else. You want to be part of the mob. You don't want to be the odd one out. But my packed lunch box smelt very different to all my
It probably
mates.
looked different.
Yeah, I had things like, prawn sandwiches, which doesn't sound, back then that was pretty fancy. Or you'd have, liver sausage sandwich instead of, little Johnny over there's got Marmite sausages, sandwiches, but I've got like liver sausage. And so I was like, I loved it, but it smelled very different. Growing up on the types of, kidneys and livers and beef cheeks and ossobuco, all, oxtail, all that stuff was all very normal. Like my mum would cook steak and kidney pies 2 or 3 times a week. And so the smell of cooking chuck and kidney was almost omnipresent. Like it was always there. And so now it's not surprising that those are the cuts that I get excited about.
That's what's normal. Tell me, so cut your own teeth there in the kitchen. Move through school, moved out of home, took that interest with you. What was the next sort of chapter of life?
So I moved out of home and I went to uni and I studied exercise science, which I kind of love. I loved the topic. Hated being at uni. I'd be better off there now, but I just hated being a student. I think I don't know why. I spent the least amount of time I could on campus. I just went in for what I needed to do and then went out. Anyway, I probably need to unpack that, but I finished uni in 98. I did all right, and then it felt to me like at that point I had to make the decision as to what career I was going to walk into for the rest of my life.
Or you felt you needed to?
I felt because my mum at that point, they'd been running pubs for maybe, I think they did close to 40 years in totality, but maybe in 98 they'd done 30 years. And then there's a few of my peers who hadn't gone to uni that were in their 5th, 6th year of their job. And I was like, oh, far out. I have not, my degree in exercise physiology or exercise science wasn't particularly vocational. It wasn't blaringly obvious to me what I was going to walk into. I considered doing physiotherapy, but that would have meant another 3 years, and I was done. I didn't want to go back. So then I was like, right, given that I don't know what I want to do, how can I defer that decision? So I remember sitting on the loo, reading a magazine, and the magazine was like the best places to be for the millennium. Number 1 was Rio de Janeiro, number 2 was Sydney, and then there was a little, in brackets, it's hosting the Summer Olympics, So great place to be for the New Year's Eve millennium. One of the first countries in the world to welcome in the new year. And then, it had the Olympics, and the Olympics were always something that I tuned into. I loved sport and competition, and so I was like, right, well, that's my ticket, right? That's how I can defer this decision. I just need to get a ticket to Sydney, Australia, and then, at least do 3 months. I probably don't want to do more than 6 months, and then I'll come back and then I'll sort out my career and the rest of my life. So I never thought for one moment that I would do more than 6 months. I had this big farewell, and I was like, I've just got to do more than 3, or else I'm going to look like a bit of a loser.
Didn't you just leave? What are you back here for?
Yeah, exactly. So I've got to do more than 3. I doubt I'll do more than 6. And I reckon the second day I was like, I'm never leaving.
So into Sydney. What was it? Did you go to Bondi or somewhere, or go clubbing? Or
no, I met this guy in a pub in England prior to going, and he'd been to Australia a number of times, and he was like, don't go to Bondi, everyone goes to Bondi, go to Coogee.
Oh, yeah.
Which,
the Coogee Hotel?
Yeah, I stayed at a backpackers just up the Coogee Bay.
If you want to flight, go to Coogee Hotel.
That's right. Salinas, as it was.
Salinas, that's right.
Yeah.
Still there.
Yeah.
Still there, yeah. Wow.
So I went there, and then within a day or two, I hired a camper van, I think, and went up the coast. And then that was me. I was sold. I was like, this place is unbelievable. And so then, I guess how I stayed here was I met my ex-wife, Tashi's mum, after about 6 months, and we became de facto, and the rest is history.
We can't finish it there. So there's some gaps there. There's some massive gaps. I know there are. So, but you had your challenges though. Not personal. Well, I mean, not relationship, not those, but like health challenges though. You had your what job were you doing, or what was? And then I'm interested to know, like, where did when does someone become a chef, not a cook, and where did that when did that come into it?
Well,
you can't get away. You're not just going to end it there. Come on.
I was just going to walk off.
Drop the mic.
Well, yeah, I guess that next part does segue into where I am now. So having a working holiday visa, and then subsequently a few tourism visas until I was sort of a temporary resident, and then a permanent resident, and then a citizen. Like, it sort of limited the type of industry or the type of work I could get. So it was either hospitality or construction, i.e. work that paid cash that I didn't need a visa for. So I was sort of dabbling in construction for a little while until I could get sort of a more stable... Well, again, at this point, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So, I was pretty content, I guess, just sitting in construction. And then something pretty cataclysmic happened in 2005. So predating all this, I haven't touched on it at all, but I'm like super sporty, right? Like, I love... There's a few sports that I get quite serious about, particularly soccer, but I love training, I love exercise, I love all that stuff. And then I am the guy that you see running everywhere, doing hills and sand, and that lunatic that doesn't stop moving. And then in 2005, whilst I'm working for this construction mob, I ruptured discs in my back, in my lower back. So never having an injury of that nature, I just thought, okay, well, today's Thursday, I probably won't be able to go to the gym for a couple of days, maybe have the weekend off, and I'll be right on Monday. Anyway, Monday rolled around, I was in no better shape. I was still on the floor in a lot of pain and discomfort. And so I started trying to heal my injury by going to physiotherapy and all the things that most of us would do, physio, massage, acupuncture, osteo, all the kind of tried and tested. Anyway, that period of me not being able to move my body in a way that, for the first 27 years I loved, and it was almost my identity, right? Like, it was who I was. That was rudely interrupted, and that lasted 7 years. So in 7 years I became depressed, isolated. There was always people around me, but I tuned right out. It was very hard for me to be present when you're dealing with the discomfort and pain of a back injury, and then the loss of identity, and I really fell into a bit of a heap. But you still have to present like a normal, happy person. Well, that's
7 years is a long time.
7 years. Well, I thought that was me. I thought that was my lot. I thought that was the cards that I've been dealt, and I've just got to deal with this for the rest of my life. So that was from 27. I was 27 years old. I hadn't had children at this point. Depressed. There were moments where my back was okay-ish, and that's when Scott started to come back. And I talk about me in the third person, but it's like your well-being sort of re-emerges and your lightness re-emerges. But when it's stifled through pain and discomfort, there's not much you can do about it. Anyway, so...
So 7 years, back to the actual injury itself, were you like doing a massive, I don't know, whatever these ones are, clean and jerk or something that did it? Or was it like a bang, that sore, or was it just a deterioration?
It was at work. The guy who I was working for, he pulled me off a job and said, I'm having a pool built at my home. I need you to lay the irrigation, there's pipes coming off a pool, and you need to dig out these irrigation channels for these pipes. And it was really clayey soil, so I was digging, for days on end, filling barrows and skips and stuff. And it was like on day 3, late in the afternoon, using one of those long-handled shovels. So not ideal. And I literally dug the shovel in, twisted as I'd done hundreds of times before, and just heard this audible pop.
Oof.
And I was like, oh, that doesn't feel, well, it doesn't sound right, but it started to seize up and stiffen. But I carried on working like an idiot. Whether it made any difference, I don't know. The injury had, it had ruptured. Anyway, I got in the car. And this is how ridiculously religious I was about exercise. I used to drop the car off to my ex-wife, and then I used to drop the car off at her work so she could drive once she'd finished work back home, and I would run. That was from Bondi Junction to Bondi, so not far. And I left the keys under the seat, and I went to start running, and all this, like a lightning bolt right up my back and down my legs. I was like, I ain't running anywhere. So I hobbled home, and that's when the convalescing started. By the time I got home, I laid on the floor. And then for 7 years, I was kind of not the man who I once was, and certainly not the man who I wanted to be.
What does that do to a man?
Well, I think about this, and maybe if you're the type of guy who's sedentary and kind of happy, just kind of, I don't know what the right expression is, but kind of, I guess someone who isn't using their body to the fullest. And you could argue the injury occurred because I was exploiting my body. I was pushing it and I think that's probably what happened. It wasn't necessarily the action at the work site per se. It was all the preceding stress and load I'm putting on myself. Not fueling myself right, over-exercising, undernourishing. I probably had a bit of neuroses around how I looked.
So you were pretty fit though. So you were strong.
I was probably incredibly fit. Probably not. I'm much stronger now. I used to do a lot of running, a lot of cardio, a lot of running, hill sprints, sand sprints, lots of races. Half marathons is probably the furthest I went, but lots of competitive 10K runs, but just not resting. I wouldn't let myself off the hook. It became a and I had an unhealthy relationship with exercise. There's no question about that. There's a real neurosis around it. So then I guess I'm almost not. I'm not satisfied with, 4 years in, 5 years in. Maybe some people start to think, okay, there's nothing I can do. But I was like, no, I don't want to acknowledge that these are the cards I've been dealt. There must be something else out there. So I saw everybody.
Yeah.
Chiros, osteos, healing hands.
So all the way from sort of a very science-based to bit of weirdo stuff.
Well, because I've got an exercise science background, and I had scans, and I could see, it's empirical to me that you could see the bulges within the discs. The MRIs told the story, and so to me, in my rational brain, in my sciencey brain, was like, okay, well, there needs to be a mechanical solution. If there's going to be a solution, it's got to be a mechanical solution that fixes it. But within that time, I got pretty desperate, and I did see a lady who claimed to have healing hands. Nothing moved the needle. Like, I might get a little respite from a massage or some needles going in, but then within half an hour of leaving the clinic, I'm like, oh, there it is, it's come back. And then I guess this is the crux, right? So although I see this time as the worst time in my life, throw in a divorce and within that 7 years, like it's without a doubt the hardest time in my life, but equally it's the best time, because it taught me a lot about myself and my resilience. And it taught me, I always said to myself, if I ever come good, if I ever fix this fucking thing, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Oh, yeah.
If I ever fix this thing, I'll never complain about anything else for the rest of my days. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't lived up to that all that well. But it's there. It's like a reference. That's as low as I'll probably ever get. So enjoy the day. As bad as your day might get, it's better than wallowing in pain for fucking 7 years. So anyway, 7 years of every osteo and physio and chiro I could come across. And then in that 8th year, I started to read around diet. And my diet wasn't terrible, but I can look back and go, okay, well, there's some potholes there. There was some things that... So anyway, what I was reading was telling me that there are foods that are pro-inflammatory, and there's a bunch of foods that were anti-inflammatory. So at that point, I really had nothing else to lose. So I modified my diet according to those sort of two buckets, if you like. I systematically modified it by eliminating, not cutting back, but eliminating the foods that were pro-inflammatory, and embracing with open arms the foods that were anti-inflammatory. And I became really militant about that. Like, I was not the kind of guy that you'd want over for dinner anymore. the invites dried up.
We'd love to have Scott, but he's such a pain in the ass.
Yeah, probably not.
Well, would you bring your own stuff, or would you go into the kitchen and go, don't you be bloody giving me any...
In all honesty...
Or no one invited you anymore?
Yeah. No one invited me. Not many people were inviting me anyway, but then it was like, oh, he's that fucking troublemaker. I'd be the...
Him and his back and his food shit.
Yeah, there's cushions to prop him up. What a loser.
His Zimmer frame.
So
what about exercise in that time? I mean, you were incapacitated somewhat. So was that a frustration? Like, you knew what it felt like to be fit and healthy. You couldn't necessarily do a lot of that, and so you were caught between, you can't do it, but you want to.
Yeah,
so what do you do?
Well, exactly.
You just sort of like, you're sedentary, and did you feel like shit because of it?
Well, I would get in my own way a lot of the time. So I would go, okay, my back's not so bad today, so I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
But given that I'm
A maniac.
I've got at that point I had an ego around exercise, and I'm a red-blooded male. I wouldn't be doing like Pilates type remedial smart exercise.
Well, you wouldn't tell anyone if you did anyway.
No, God, no. No, just for the record, I didn't.
Yeah,
No, but do you know what I mean? I would do more than I would do more than I should for my condition and my state. And so it would agitate it, and I would be in a position where I really couldn't do anything for the next
Your own worst enemy.
Yeah. Always getting in my own road. So yeah, I dabbled, but it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything like it was before, in terms like you do a session and there's, you've enjoyed it, you've worked up a sweat, you feel great. It was actually wasn't intensive enough to give you the elation, but it was intensive enough to agitate your back and make it worse. And so then you're like, you're an idiot, Scott. Like, and this was like years of this behaviour.
I was going to say, then you turn around and do it the next week, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, you're an idiot.
You said it.
Yeah.
Not me.
No, totally.
And so 7 years of that, what was the moment? So you're starting a bit of a nutrition journey there because of, you've taken the reins and gone, right, I need to be reducing inflammation. I need to source foods that are anti-inflammatory. Was there sort of a convergence of your interest in food from the pub days and your growing up to sort of like, creative culinary stuff to like, I've got to do this and find these foods? When did that all sort of turn into, an interest or a convergence of those things? And then when did the chef bit happen? Like, what,
that was like 14 questions there, Charlie.
I know. I'm just going to have a break here. You're going to dance around that
light
for a
up
while.
a cigarette.
Again. Oh, no, I don't smoke.
Yeah, I guess I became quite militant about what was in and what was out. And what was in was actually some of those foods that my mum used to cook, right? So the livers and the kidneys and the broth and all those, that, I guess I could see that there were, as I said, potholes, and so I started to smooth those out. And then because I became quite militant and regimented about what was in, the only way I could control what was in was to make it myself. So when you go to a cafe or a restaurant, rather than being that pain in the ass customer, can I just check with the chef if he's got, if they've put in that. It's like, okay, it's not to say I didn't eat out, but 99 times out of 100, I'd be like, well, I know what I need for my healing process. So the easiest way, the most convenient way, the quickest way is just to make it myself. And so this was like 2013, and I started to cook a lot more than I'd ever done because I couldn't rely on the cafe down the road or the restaurant down the road or the dial-in, or not that we did much dial-in back then, but I had to become like the custodian, I guess, of my own health, right? I had to take it into my own hands. I couldn't rely on outsourcing that stuff anymore. And so I started to really, I guess, it was a paleo way of eating. And so at that point, I was cooking more, I was getting more adventurous. Obviously, what you're cooking from, the bounty of foods that you're cooking from is, it's certainly not limited, but it's a certain bucket of food, right? You're not cooking with pasta and bread and all that sort of stuff. You're cooking from this, and this was all stuff that was in my mum's fridge back in the day. And all those cuts of meat that we've talked about. So it was all kind of familiar, but it was the first time really I was sort of getting creative and mixing things up a little bit. And then I got invited to go on a cooking show. So that was 2012 I got to film it.
What was the show?
It was My Kitchen Rules.
Oh, yeah.
And so for 6 months, because we did reasonably well, and so if you do reasonably well, you're on it for months, and we were there in the semi-final, so we which takes about 6 months to film. So in 6 months...
When you say we, who was...
Oh, sorry, yeah, I've got My Kitchen Rules. For those unfamiliar with it, you buddy up. You go, with your best mate or your mum or your dad or your brother or whatever. In this instance, I was with a guy who shared very similar values around health and nutrition and fitness. He was another PT in the same park that I was training at. And so...
How does one get to... You said you're invited to do that?
Well, yeah.
Someone goes, hey, you're a fit-looking bloke.
He invited me.
Oh, okay, cool, yeah.
So
he had a connection, or he had some sort of...
No, he
said, we should do this.
I'd expressed to him, we were friends, and I'd expressed to him that I wanted to... this was 2012, right? And so I could see that there was a ceiling to my business as a personal trainer. But I wanted to break out of that ceiling. So the only person that I could see in my industry that had done that and done that with success was Michelle Bridges. So she had this online platform.
Yep.
So she didn't have to be in the park. She could touch all these people's lives, whether you're in Wagga or Perth or, wherever. I thought, that's genius. I need to get to a place where people knew about her because of Biggest Loser. So is there a way that I can engineer my popularity to increase beyond the people in Bondi that come to my boot camps? And so I looked at getting PR, and that was not cheap.
No.
I couldn't afford it. And so then I said to this guy, Luke, I said, if I write a program, do you want to come in on, two heads are better than one? So I started chiseling away at this online program, which I thought was going to be, my golden goose. And then he came to me a few weeks later. He was like, we need to do My Kitchen Rules. And I was like, he was like a trash TV connoisseur.
He knew, you didn't know what he was talking about.
No. I said, yeah, let's do that. So we made this like cheeky video. Like you didn't have to, but we submitted a video with our application. That was on a Friday. On the Monday, he said, we're going to send a producer around with a camera guy, and they're going to film you cooking.
As a test or a casting or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was...
So you're like shirts off?
No. So we did all right at the cooking thing, and then...
In the show, and you did it as a contestant or as a team.
No, in that
the little casting. Yeah.
We did enough to get. We got in.
Yeah, right.
But I didn't know the format of the show. I hadn't seen an episode, let alone a series. And then he kept saying, "You need to come and watch." He had all this not on video.
You need to see what you're getting yourself involved in.
So the episode that he showed me was one from the previous season, and it must have been really late in the game, by which time all teams have improved. They're now serving restaurant quality food. It's plated up. It's looking attractive. It's looking, stuff that you expect to find in a restaurant. And I was like, mate, we are so far beyond. I can cook nutritional food, and I can make it taste reasonable, but this is. So at that point, I started to, get pretty nervous about it. So we just crammed every day. We'd meet up. We treated it like work. We'd meet up. We'd cook 3 things every day for about 6 weeks. And then we got on the show, and then, as I said, we were there for 6 months, and that's, I didn't see much of my son. I didn't see much of my partner. Work becomes, you have to sort of shut down shop for a little while. And that's all we did. We practiced, competed, deep dive recipes, practice. So you become very immersed in this one thing. And we got, as did everyone else, much better at that thing. And so I came off the show and I was so much more passionate about cooking than any time in my past. I've always cooked, as I've said, I've always cooked for myself, but having that immersive experience with food and ingredients and flavours and combinations, you go, I bloody love this thing. And so that sort of planted a seed that I haven't really, that I've allowed to germinate and flourish, and it's taken me in various different avenues, but I guess that was the seed started when I was 6 maybe in the kitchen, but the impetus really that was the catalyst, right? That was the thing that kind of...
It was fertilised.
Yeah, fertilised.
So you'd obviously, so this was like the 7 years. There'd been 7 years, and so this is post that. You'd got to a point where you were able to, you were training in a park and you had your own business and that thing. So you'd obviously got to a point where you were better.
No.
So is this within the 7 years?
So this is we filmed in 2012. It aired in 2013, and it's 2013 that I'm starting to feel the benefits of my particular diet. So I sank deeply into the world of paleo, and we were talking about the paleo diet. Not that they aired any of that content, but we were being explicit about that type of food on the show. They
weren't airing it because it was a bit controversial, a bit off.
Yeah, probably. Topic. It's sort of, I don't know why they didn't. We were earmarked, that we were called, our nickname was the healthy PTs or something, but they didn't, we spoke ad nauseum probably about the health benefits of this, that and the other, but they kind of didn't, they cut all of that out.
That's interesting. Because I guess paleo 2013, I'm just thinking, when there were a few cafes in Sydney popping up that were doing a bit of that. Paleo was more of a thing. People were still confused about what it actually was, so, and there was always conjecture as to what
was in, what was
out. No, you're not allowed to eat beans. No, you can't eat beans.
They'll bloody kill you.
Oh, that's right. Or, I'm not even sure quite where that line was, but I guess there was your hardcore paleos, and then there was the ones that just kind of adopted principles.
Yeah, well, I was a hardcore paleo, and I was probably I realised that I had to become extreme because, it wasn't just a message that I was spruiking. I was the case study, right? So I was the N=1. These foods are helping me repair. And look, it's not a clinical controlled trial. My back may have just come good at that period of my life. Who knows? But I was getting a loud signal that by cutting out these foods and embracing these, something was shifting.
So what did you cut out?
Beans.
All forms of legume.
Yeah, legumes.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
No beans. No
legumes.
Beans. What are they? Are they inflammatory? Are there things in it?
Well, the conjecture is that there's certain things within certain foods that cause inflammation. So
mainly plants, those what's it called? What are those chemicals in foods? There's a name for it.
Phytates.
Yeah.
So the phytates or phytic acid is pro-inflammatory, and so in a bid to minimise the impact of inflammation on your system, then you should minimise. I don't really. Well, I certainly don't prescribe to this mode of philosophy of eating anymore, but there's compounds within foods, whether that's tannins, sopanins, gluten, gliadine, phytic acid, all these things that trigger inflammation. So you need to put all that to one side in a bid to keep inflammation at bay. And so off goes your bread, off goes your legumes, off goes your pulses, what else? Pasta. And so
wheat.
So then you're like,
carbs.
what am I going to put my eggs on? And that's just a habit, right? You just put eggs on toast because that's what you've been doing.
Hang on, what does an egg taste like without toast? What must be disgusting.
I'll give you one up. So you just have to break down those certain habits that we, And so anyway, I guess it made an impactful difference to my mobility and pain and discomfort. And so as all that started to reduce, and this took about a year, so I, as I said, became very militant about what was in and what was out. And then over weeks, it wasn't like months, over weeks it started to, it's not as stiff, not as painful. And I started to, when I was training, my ability to recover, so it wasn't triggering an episode as long as it had before. So as I said before, I'd train pig-headedly and it would be intense enough to elicit an inflammatory episode where I then couldn't do anything, and that might be weeks, right? Now it was only days, so I could train more often, so that was helping my headspace immediately. And so over the course of a year, I got back in the gym. I got back to, I started to introduce lifting. I remodeled how I trained. I stopped running. I was like, okay, well, if I can't run, that's fine. It was a thing that I loved and enjoyed and was passionate about. But if I can move my body in another way and get enjoyment out of that, then that's okay. I can let running go. So I started to get in the gym and lift in a way that you would think would be counterintuitive for a back injury. I was squatting and deadlifting and all the things that, you kind of wince if you see someone do it and they've got a back injury, but it worked. And this combination of smarter exercise combined with that controlled, managed diet, in a year I was pretty much rid of the back injury.
Your back injury was a ruptured disc or a couple of discs, was it?
It was, the main culprit was L5, S1, and then the two above that, so lumbar spine. But the main guy was that S1.
Ruptured?
Yeah, ruptured discs.
So how does the body repair that rupture? Bulging. Does the body repair that? Does it strengthen it? Because I imagine most people with that injury would default to operations and God knows what's fusing and things.
Yeah, you can have cages and fuses, and so I spoke to surgeons that perform that type of operation. They seem to think that I wasn't the candidate for that, which I'm grateful that they had that kind of opinion of my injury. So I've had many MRIs subsequent to that first one. So there's no denying that there's a bulge on that first MRI on that lower vertebrae, on that lower disc. And then over that 7 years, I had many. And over that time, instead of it being, so a healthy disc is sort of, not oblong, but,
and not rectangle.
It's spherical, not a perfect circle. And then you get a bulge. And so like this inner, there's the middle bit is quite gooey. It's a substance, then it's got this thick, really thick membrane. Yeah. What happens is the inside of that membrane is compromised, and so that gooey gel-like substance starts to push out, and it forces the It sort of compromises the shape, and that's when it can push on your nerves. But over time, it kind of... So I guess the caveat is that maybe taking the food away for a second, it may be that over time my back would have come good anyway, and maybe I just assisted it with the foods. Maybe the way I've sort of... Because it's not a controlled study, it's not a clinic, it's just me, my experience. I am the case study. The way that I've positioned it in my mind is that there's no doubt food can cause inflammation, and there's no doubt that your body's MO is to try and heal itself. That's what we do, and we do it very efficiently if we give it the right inputs, right? So you're eating the right quantity of food, so you're giving it the energetic requirements, and then you're giving it a whole spectrum and gamut of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And at that point, your body will do what it does best, and that's to try and heal and repair. But if you're giving your body a bunch of things that produce inflammation, then instead of giving your... Its bandwidth to repair is compromised because it's got spot fires here and there. So I just eliminated, in my mind, in my logic, I've just eliminated those spot fires. And so now all the attention, the healing and the repair can go towards my lumbar spine.
You gave it the opportunity with all the right ingredients and situation to get better.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So back to my kitchen rules, and so you were not out of the woods at that point, you were saying?
Oh God, no.
It had it served you being on the show? Was it a good thing? Got you into
100%.
Yeah. I mean, from a notoriety sort of point of view, and where did it take you? Wanted to take?
Yeah, it's whether I do it all again is another thing, but it was hard, and for someone who's an introvert like myself, it's sort of you're rubbing up against.
It was ballsy.
Yeah, like the guy that I went on with, he's an extrovert, and he almost used it as an audition, because he wants to be in front of camera, he wants to present, which I just found like so jarring, because I want to be in the background, I don't want to be on camera. I don't mind cooking on camera because that's you sort of focused on the task at hand, but speaking to a camera is a...
What's happened?
I'm just speaking on camera.
You love doing it. You're now on an hour and 18 minutes, so you clearly like it.
Yeah, I do now because, well, not that I love it, but I realise this is what has happened, Charlie, is that the personality type that I am, being in that world of media at that point in my life was so jarring. It caused me so much stress. And it honestly didn't help. It helped in some way to have a partner who was the personality type that he was, because he sort of pulled me forward a little bit. But in some ways I was trying to compare my delivery and my style to his. He was like this natural born presenter. He was very good on camera, very, very charismatic and engaging, and had no reservations, no fear around it. I was like dripping in fear. And so then you come off a show like that's very popular, and all of a sudden you do get noticed. But more importantly, which is kind of what I wanted from it, is that you get asked to come and speak about a diet or health to whoever.
Yep.
And so I remember I in those very early days, I'm only off the show a couple of months, and I got asked to speak at the MCA to 200 people, and back then I used to learn my my thing, learn my speech, not a speech, but learn my talk.
Prezzo, yeah.
Verbatim in my head.
Yeah, like scripted almost, yeah.
Because I thought like having notes or having something on the lectern that you could reference was, that you couldn't do that, or that was cheating or something. So I would have it like I'd learnt lines, like I was an actor or something, which was fine as long as you didn't lose where you were. And then there's no one, there's not a...
there's no one prompting you.
No one prompting you. So this happened at the MCA. So I'm like 20 minutes into a 40-minute presentation that I'm just regurgitating out of my mouth from my brain, you know, learnt lines, and then I go, where was I? Because I'm not then in a position that I can freestyle, different now.
Yep.
I then have this thing called splitting, which I'm not sure whether you've ever come across it, experienced it. So as a defense mechanism, we can either fight or flight, right? Or we can freeze. And so when I lost my train of thought and I couldn't grab onto that next line, my defense mechanism was to fly. So I've spoken to psychologists about this, and my brain goes into flight, so my brain buggers off, shuts down, and now I'm still there. I can't take flight.
You can't find the thread of the next line or the next thing.
And so not only that, it's like the next level to that is that you don't know, like everything just goes, right? So it's not like you're just clutching for the next line. You're clutching, what was I talking about? Why am I here? Who are all these people standing? You know, it really like...
So you're literally stepping out of that scenario onto a fresh page going, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
So that's what happened on stage.
So I've got, 200 people looking at me and probably like feeling for me, poor bastard, doesn't know. And so at that point, the guy that I went on the show with, he was sort of off stage. He comes on and saves me and then finishes off his thing and can ad-lib and spontaneous talking and quite amazing. But it disarmed me. I'm now standing on stage like a fool.
Did people, did they see that happen, or is it like, that's all part of the thing? No, it's my turn. But no.
I, was looking at my feet for a little while, going, oh God, what was I saying? What was the train of thought? But the more you're in, the longer that occurs, the less likely is that the more fear builds up. God, there's all these people. Yeah, you're spiraling. Yeah. And so then I was like, I never want that to happen ever again. So I went and saw a performance coach. I went to see a kinesiologist. There's like 2 or 3 people I went to see that helped me become better at public speaking. But really, like I was saying this to Till the other day when we were talking about this subject, that really it's like you've got to do the reps. You've actually just got to stand up and talk in front of people. That's like the biggest way to improve.
And make the mistakes and because you will, and you do, and everyone always does, I guess, just maybe smaller ones and less often. And
not caring about the mistakes. Yeah. I think that's... So instead of spiralling, you've sort of...
You make a joke of it. Yeah. And so that was, again, not a low point, but that was certainly another catalyst for improvement or to move to, I guess it's another... Your presentations and your ability to public speak now is another feather in your cap that you've got, your incremental improvement in who you are now. Yeah.
Because I became... I sort of pledged to myself to be like the yes man. So I wanted something that increased my reach. So I did that, went on a show. And so now for the next year or whatever, probably longer, I was just like, yes. You're getting all these invitations.
You'll do it. You'll just,
Yeah. Just say yes, panic later. So I'm really like proud of myself for flying directly in the face of what is comfortable and familiar. I really wanted to I really had to go against that, because if I just stayed in the comfortable and the familiar, those opportunities would have dried up like no one's business.
Well, you wouldn't have improved.
Yeah, we wouldn't have improved. I don't seek it out, public speaking, but it doesn't disable. I was surprised I didn't see you there actually the other day at the sustainable table.
Was that in where was that one this year?
It was at the Commons in Marrickville, or
when was that on?
Thursday.
Just gone. Oh, 2 days ago.
Yeah, I was sure you'd be there.
I didn't know it was on. No, Sustainable Table is in Victoria-based. Those guys, Sustainable Table. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. No, look, that would have been fantastic.
Yeah, it was
love it. Yeah, that's a great spot. Did you talk there?
I didn't talk there, but it was one of those scenarios that the team introduced themselves and gave a little speech about what they're trying to achieve, and then she says, right, okay, maybe if we could just sort of loosen up a little bit and form a big circle, and then we'll go around the circle and share a little bit about yourself and who you are. And
so was there a lot of people there, to make a circle?
No, like 20, 25 or something.
Yeah.
But those words would have just
you'd have been
I would have
horrified.
buckled at the knees, 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. But now I'm like, oh, yeah, it's fine. When it's my turn, I'll just, you get a little bit nervous when the guy next to you is wrapping up his thing, and it's quite funny. Oh, prick.
You're hoping the guy next to you is boring as shit.
Yeah.
Do you have an elevator pitch? Do you have a little that sort of a thing? You've got a 30-second hi, I'm Scott Gooding, and
No, my elevator pitch goes on for half an hour.
It's like a escalator pitch.
Yeah. No, I'm terrible at that. That's why I kind of like podcasts, because I ramble and I, clutch at ideas, and I'm not one of those super punchy, neatly concise kind of guys. I'm
clearly. A minute, an hour and a half in. Let's jump to well, not today, but to now. So, because you've got lots of things going on. Oh, why not just throw a little in there? It'd be awesome. That's a great. I haven't seen a La Crusade coffee thing before.
Got it in the UK.
Oh, do they have them out here? Do they sell them out? Maybe on the line. I might be able to get it on the line. This is delicious. I'll be up all night, but who cares? It's Easter Saturday. So what? Tell me about. Actually, you know what? There's a bit missing there, because Matilda's in your life, and we don't need to, delve into all that. But that's been, I've known you guys for a couple of years now, and I see some amazing things. The Good Farm Shop is 12, 18 months old now. Is that 18 months old now? Let's talk about that, because that looks to me, from sort of, I guess, an outsider's point of view, as a wonderful union of your skills and your passion, and tell us about that.
Yeah, so we started the Good Farm Shop 18 months ago. It would have been August, September 20.
In the guts of COVID.
Yeah. Which really had it's still a humble business now. There's no ifs or buts about that, but it started off as simply a cow share scheme.
Yeah.
That Till's mum and dad have a farm that's farmed regeneratively up the coast. And so we were like, how do we eat that meat? How do we feed our family that meat? So we literally just got an email together, sent it out to friends and family. If we plucked this animal off the property, who would want to go in on it?
And it was one of their steers or heifers or something.
Yeah. because we couldn't find anywhere around here that had that type of provenance, that type of, our local butcher, he's a lovely guy, but he, kind of doesn't know where, where's that Scotch fillet? Oh, I don't know. Doesn't know, like...
And sometimes they'll tell you what you want to hear anyway.
Yeah, there's probably a little bit of that as well. And so, I hope he doesn't listen to this.
Oh no, he's one of our Patreon community. He's going to get it hot off the
Very
bat.
nice guy.
We don't. Well, no one's going to know who he is except for your close family members who.
Yeah.
So you're safe.
It started off as a cow share scheme that we'd do once a month. End of the month, we'd sell boxes, 5 kilo, 10 kilo boxes, until such time that there was enough to extract a body off the property. Sounds like murder, doesn't it? And that's exactly what we do.
Murder. Yeah.
And so that's how it started, its life, and we rolled that model out for a couple of months, maybe 3 months, and then we were like, well, maybe we should add eggs. Maybe we should add chicken. Maybe we should add lamb. Maybe we should add quail. And so we started to diversify. And within a short period of time, we became essentially an online butcher that we were using and plugging into various small, independent, regenerative farms around predominantly New South Wales. The other thing that happened was that we went from a once a month business, sending out, disseminating boxes at the end of each month to you can order meat anytime, or you can order our products anytime and it will be delivered within 2 or 3 business days. So there was limitations with that model for us anyway, in our experience. And one was the proportion of certain cuts versus, if you butcher an animal like a cow, let's say, not all cuts are evenly just distributed. You get a lot of chuck, you get a lot of mince, you get a lot of round steak, but you don't get much eye fillet. But the eye fillet is highly prized and everyone wants one of those in their box. And so after about 5 months of this, we realised, okay, we've got a shitload of mince here and we're still having to pull off more bodies off the property because we've run out of Scotch and T-bones and the such. And so I started to turn some of those cuts, the mince, the chuck, the osso, into ready meals.
Yep.
Which over time became more popular than people ordering the other stuff. And so we went to the UK at Christmas, got really inspired by what we saw in that ready meal space over there, and came back and completely ditched the butchery side of our business. So we stopped
the fresh meat or the yeah.
So we just, and now it's now we know what we are. We're not trying to do 1,000,001 things. We are a ready meals company that, I guess it's worth noting that the world doesn't need another ready meals company, but maybe...
Well, not a generic one.
Not a generic one. One that has integrity and there's a nod to the provenance of the produce. But I have to say, it's lovely. Maybe lovely is too not the right word, but it's pretty awesome doing it with your partner.
I'd say that's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Love's in there somewhere.
Love is in there.
No, I think I get it. What a wonderful thing.
It just works for us because we're both at home, we're both wrangling the kids, and there's opportunity to, float some ideas and, take it in turns to get work done, and all that's becoming easier with both kids being at daycare and stuff. But I think it's been good for our relationship to do it together.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I imagine there's lots of partners who have started businesses together and it's probably not because of, I guess, for whatever reason, proximity, like work, family, play, it's all together. But for you guys to have worked, for that to work is commendable.
I think I've thought about this, and I think it has to come down to respect. You have to have respect for the other person, and I obviously did before we started the business together. But Till comes from a different industry altogether. She's from film, directing, acting, writing. Like her brain fizzes with creativity, and so she's now not doing what her first love, and that is her first love, that creative writing TV shows and directing and things like that. But all she's done, she's a force, Till. Like, she's transformed that creativity that she exhibited in that industry and repackaged it over here in the form of like problem solving, conjuring up new ideas and ideation. Like, it's just a different version of creativity. And so she's just this furnace of like ideas and propagating ideas. And
is she solving? Well, I guess you are. I ask this as a duo. Are you solving a problem? And what problem are you solving, do you think?
Well, this sort of, it was good to be at this sustainable table gig, because you realise that there's other people in this space that are attempting to solve a common problem. I think the Good Farm Shop, as I said, we don't need another ready meals company, but we need one that has the integrity. And I think the problem, if we were to name the problem that we're trying to solve, I guess it's probably twofold or maybe more, but one might be that I think it's about time that we sort of pricked our ears and eyes open to where our food has come from and what food system we're sort of supporting. And it's not a conversation about meat versus plant, because it doesn't matter what your preference is, if where you're getting it from. I mean, that's the most important thing. So whether you're eating your lentils and your anti-meat, if you're getting it from an industrialised food system, then you're still contributing to, potentially poor ecology and, all the rest of it, likewise with the animal side of the ledger. So I think one of the biggest problems is that we've got to a point in our society that we can shop somewhat obliviously. We can shop unconsciously almost. It's a very privileged position to be in that we can walk down each supermarket aisle and there's an abundance of options, and we can just throw it in our trolley or our basket and not pay any sort of pay any attention or credit to where that exhibit A has come from. And so I think that's one of the problems that we're trying to we're starting to, through our social media and through the website and through everything that Till and I do, we try and we're not trying to ram things down people's throats, but we're just trying to gently nudge them to that there is this other way of eating, and there is this, this sustainable table event the other day. It is actually about remodeling the food landscape, remodeling the food system. We've got to, in 2023, a very ingrained, excuse the pun, food system that there aren't many winners, really, from the grower or the farmer, the land, the animals. Like, there's not, we shouldn't be high-fiving that system, I don't think. So there is this alternative, and you know this very well, there is this alternative way to produce food that doesn't deplete the soil, that doesn't that maximises animal welfare, and doesn't contribute to the climate problem that we have. But, it's nothing new. You're in the world of biodynamics. That's nothing new.
No.
But it's
100 years old next year.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's in that sort of state. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's when you zoom out a little bit, we just got ahead of ourselves as a species. In a bid to get efficiencies and high production and high yields, we've compromised a lot of things, namely soil health, animal welfare. There's some, the industrialised food system is pretty grotesque in places, but it doesn't have to be. And maybe there's a period at which, the alternative food system, the biodynamic or the regen version, it just takes time to grow. I feel like we've all been in a bit of an echo chamber, but I feel like it's growing. And there's some thought leaders and early adopters like Harris Farm that are trying to fly the flag for regen, and good on them. And so slowly the foods that are coming through that system grows, more farmers adopt that methodology and philosophy, and maybe we never get rid of that other version. But I'm hopeful that silo that's producing food regeneratively just grows over the time, and I think it will.
Look, I've no doubt it is growing, and we'll never get rid of, not that we necessarily want to get rid of the other alternative, because I just don't know, it's let's focus our energies on what we can, can do and can influence and change. And I guess back to Sustainable Table, they're doing some fantastic things and initiatives and helping fund, initiatives in the space, which is great. So I'll have to keep in touch with them a bit more and contribute in some different ways. I'm conscious of time, and we better wrap it up. What I want to do though, before we do wrap this bit up, is we will get to we'll do a little Q&A for our Patreon community, and those who are not a part of the Patreon community, then sadly you'll miss these next questions that relate to...
This is the good stuff.
This is the good stuff. Yeah, no, we've just been dabbling, we've just been dancing around the hardcore questions, skirting around it. The hardcore questions we're going to hit you with in a minute. But I do want you to touch on, before we step into the next one, which we will do very quickly, is the Scott Gooding project, because I want, where do people find... I know that's probably another podcast in itself, but, where can they find you, so that they can, get to know you better and understand what services and what you're providing to the world, and I guess really turning what you've told us into something that people can tap into. I think the simple answer to that is the Good Farm Shop. I've done 1,000,001 things in health and food and nutrition over the last few years, and I've probably spread myself thin. But now it's just me, Till, family, the Good Farm Shop, and that's in a nutshell. So if you want to, I do have an Instagram, which is Scott Gooding Project. We'll have it all up on the notes for sure.
The Good Farm Shop is as much about the business as it is about education and family. There's a bit of everything in there.
It's a culmination of all of your life. Well, your life work. You're only a young fella, so there's a lot of your life to go. But you've crammed a fair bit in.
I'm very lucky in the sense that the business that I have created with Teal is actually the amalgam of all the things that I've been working on for the last 20 years. It's an amalgam of nutrition and food and cooking and hopefully doing something right by the environment and the planet. It's a pretty feel-good business to be working in and on, and that just, there's another layer to that, and doing it with your wife, with your kids around. It's pretty cool. It's a privileged position to be in.
Totally, and but well deserving of you to be in that situation though, because it's not as though it's all been beer and skittles all the way to this point. And again, it's that, and it comes up time and time again with my guests it's the challenges, it's the low points, growth happens in the valley, not on the tops of hills, so it's those challenges and it's those low points or those, the dips that initiate and are the catalyst for change and the pushing and the shoving and the pain, there's no growth stimulant like pain that you've certainly experienced at different points in your life which have propelled you into the space you're in and made you the person you are. So I think it's fantastic. I'm so glad we finally got to have this conversation.
Yeah.
We spent the first 20 minutes talking about ghosts. Scott, I'm conscious of the time. You need to get going. We're going to have a little quick Q&A, and you can, if you need to jump in the car and go, and I can pack up, I promise I'll shut the door. I won't go sniff your undies or anything weird like that. Again. Remember last time you busted me doing that?
On your head.
On. Actually, I've got yours on now. I must give them back. Scott, that has been such a lovely way to spend a Saturday afternoon up here at Whale Beach, overlooking amazing Pacific Ocean, having lovely chats. And I love that I don't generally have much of a plan when I sit down and speak with my guests because I don't want to. I'd rather it go where it needs to go and sort of, a bit of prompting and so on. But you've certainly... any reservations you might have had or any public speaking nervousness that you might have had once upon a time is clearly, even though it's just me, there's not like 200 people out the front there. There will be 2 million people listening to this.
2 million?
2 million, yes.
Really?
Just on day.
You told me at the end.
And day one. In the first 24 hours.
Do you have 2 million?
No. God, I wish I did. I'm no Joe Rogan. 2 million would be great. I'm probably clocking up 1 million downloads now.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, I have no idea.
Might drop off now.
Do you reckon I'll go unsubscribe?
Oh, the guy talked about fucking Supernatural for the first 20 minutes.
the weirdo. No, I got him, yes. I had that all rigged up. That was a prop. I actually pulled a string and went, that door opened. Let's talk about spirits. Yeah. Let's get to Q&A. That's been amazing. And again, Scott, thank you so much for your time. If you want to hear the Q&A... some questions that go far deeper than we've gone the last hour and 40 minutes, 50 minutes. And
the real gritty stuff.
The really gritty stuff. Sign up to the Patreon community. Go to charliearnott.com.au and listen to this Q&A. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Charlie.
And next week on the Regenerative Journey, our guest is Alan Parker, wonderful human behaviour expert, neuroscientist, man who can read human behaviour and he's had a fascinating life in that field. That's next week on the Regenerative Journey. I've known Alan for many years now, actually, through the RCS group, and it was just such a lovely thing to circle back with Alan to his life, having not seen him for some years, and he is an absolute dynamo. You'll just have to wait and hear how much of a dynamo next week on the Regenerative Journey. Alan Parker.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.